Before we dive into the actual substance of the 8 to 2 theory today, we really need to put something right out on the table. It is a transparency notice, straight from William Mile himself. Sunny and I, well, we are synthetic AI personalities. We are not sitting in a physical studio with mugs of tea, though it certainly feels like we are sometimes. But, and this is the crucial part, William comes up with all the ideas for these scripts, and while AI sometimes assists with drafting them, he personally reviews, edits, and vets every single word to ensure it is completely consistent with his life's work. You will actually hear his own physical voice of approval at the very end of the episode.
Yeah, no smoke and mirrors here. We are the voices, but the brain behind the curtain is very much William. And speaking of his work, Eleanor, I keep coming back to this really striking phrase from his book, Imagine, Toward a Brotherhood of Man. He talks about understanding behavioural patterns as, let me get the exact wording here, man's foundation for civilization. Like, not just a nice thing to study, but the actual foundation. Before you build schools, before you write laws, you have to get this right.
Exactly. Because if you do not understand how people actually behave, and more importantly, how certain divisive elements can systematically sabotage things, then your shiny new infrastructure is just, well, it is built on sand. You have to establish that baseline, that foundation for civilization, so people can recognise the sabotage before it tears the whole house down. And William argues that the way we build this foundation is through narrative, through storytelling that shapes how we see our collective behaviour.
Which, okay, when you say storytelling shaping behaviour, my mind immediately jumps to something like, well, Star Trek. I mean, think about it. That show has been running in some form for, 6 decades now? It is this massive multi-generational bridge. You have grandparents who watched the original series in 1966, parents who grew up on the next generation in the 90s, and kids watching the new spin-offs today. They are all sitting on the same couch, sharing this one cooperative vision.
Yes! The longevity of Star Trek is not just about spaceships and phaser cannons. It is about that unifying storyline. It is a cultural anchor that shows us a future where we did not blow ourselves up, where we actually figured out how to work together. It gives 3 generations of a family a common language for progress, which is, when you think about it, incredibly rare in our modern fragmented media landscape.
It really is. And it fits so perfectly into what William calls the 8 to 2 lens. Like, on the Enterprise, you have humans, Vulcans, Klingons, androids, all these wildly different species with distinct cultural heritages. Their unique identities are incredibly important, but they do not use those identities to decide who is an ally or an enemy when the ship is in danger. Instead, they focus on behaviour and patterns. Who is helping us build and survive, and who is trying to destroy us?
Right. The 8 to 2 framework does not say to ignore identity, because identity is deeply important. Rather, it says we should not use those superficial categories, the race, class, or gender divisions that media constantly exploits, to distinguish between friend and foe. To decide who is an ally or an enemy, we must look at patterns and behaviour. Under this lens, we see that 80% of people who William calls 8s generally want to build, to cooperate, and to live in a reality that is manageable, while 20% are active destroyers. Now, those enablers we often see are actually part of the 8s, who sometimes seem to prefer an active destroyer's leadership style, so they tend to give their allegiance to them. These enablers make up about 30% of 8s. However, the job of the remaining 50% of 8s, both the 20% who are natural leaders and the 30% who build their vision, is to be an instrument of God's love and wisdom to help reach these enablers.
So, okay, let's do a little what if here. A thought experiment. What if independent media actually took this 8-to-2 theory seriously? Like, instead of the current model, which, let's be honest, is just an outrage loop designed to keep us isolated and staring at screens, feeling angry at our neighbours, what if media did the opposite? What if a show actively inspired you to, I don't know, turn off the podcast, put down the phone and go talk to your spouse, or go volunteer at the local school?
It sounds almost radical, doesn't it? But that is the shift. If you stop rewarding tribalism, if you stop telling people that the person across the street is their mortal enemy because of how they vote or what they look like, you suddenly free up a massive amount of human energy. Storytelling stops being a tool of distraction, a digital pacifier, and it becomes an engine for real-world community building. It starts at home, with domestic harmony, and then it ripples outward to the school board, the town hall, the neighbourhood association.
Imagine that. Media telling you to stop consuming media and go live your life. It is the ultimate paradox. But it is exactly what we need to build that foundation we were talking about. It is about using the story to mend the social fabric, not tear it apart. Well, I think that is a pretty good place to pause. Eleanor, it has been a pleasure as always.
It really has, Sunny. And now, as promised at the start of our show, here is William Mile himself with the final word.
This podcast episode is William Mile Media approved.